Hey everyone, so right now I'm editing the part 2 of the 350Z clutch install video. In this video I'm going to be installing the transmission and clutch. In part 1 I removed the transmission, so if you want to reference that video, feel free to go back to that before watching this one. If you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below, but without any further ado, I'll get right into the video.
So taking a look here, here's my clutch. You can see, like the transmission, there's a lot of material around it. This is actually the pressure plate, the white part. So yeah, I'm going to go around and remove all these bolts, the pressure plate bolts. And then from there, the clutch and the pressure plate will fly out and will come out, and I'll be left with my flywheel. So we're on the home stretch here. I mean, just pretty much remove these bolts and then remove the flywheel bolts. I highly recommend picking up a impact driver or like a Milwaukee. That's what I'm going to be using, especially for the flywheel bolts. These are pretty tight, and usually the clutch can spin. So while you're loosening those, using an impact makes your job in your life a lot easier. So I would highly recommend doing that. So I'm going to get to pulling these bolts apart and removing the old clutch and flywheel. While I'm in here, I'm going to clean up whatever I can reach, and just make sure the job is done tidy and clean. So I'll get right to it. So they're 12mm bolts. So got one more. I'm just gonna hold the pressure plate and take this last one out. So there's dowels, so you're gonna have to give it a little bit of a tug. And the clutch and flywheel. Dang, this clutch is cooked. And you'll just gonna let it fall. Doesn't really matter to me. But as you can see, I got some hot spots in the flywheel. This is a single mass flywheel. Tons of clutch material all over the place. My clutch was absolutely cooked. There's no friction material left, so it is no surprise that it was slipping. I'm actually surprised, honestly, looking at this, that it even was grabbing, because I drove it in the garage. I mean, obviously I'll put a video clip in, but it was slipping bad. But I mean, I'm surprised it didn't leave me stranded. But yeah, don't let your clutch get this bad. It was ready to explode. So we're taking the 6-buck out, like I said. I'm going back to a full face. But yeah, this clutch was beyond cooked. So the only thing left is these I forget exactly what size. I'll get back to that, back to you on that. But I'm gonna have to remove these pressure plate or flywheel bolts. These are a bit torqued on, a little bit heavier. So I'm gonna get my 1/2-inch Milwaukee, and I recommend if you're removing these, you're probably gonna need a same thing, 1/2-inch Milwaukee or a big impact. Additionally, I mean, I'll get more in depth on the install, but there is a little dot you'll see up here where my finger's pointed, and there's a dot corresponding on the crankshaft. So you wanna make sure you line that up. That's very important, because a lot of people do a clutch, and if you don't line that up, your car will likely not start. It'll just crank for hours. So I'll get more in depth on that. I gotta remove the pilot bushing, and yeah, I'll keep it pushing. But right now the clutch and pressure plate are off, so tackle this next. Right, so now I'm going to proceed with removing the flywheel. The flywheel, they use T55 bolts, or at least it's the factory. So I'm going to use my 1/2-inch Milwaukee impact to zap these out. These are pretty tight. If the flywheel starts spinning, if you're doing it by hand with a breaker bar, then you're going to have a buddy hold onto the crank, or you can put a pry bar on the flywheel and stop it from moving that way. But in this case, I'm going to try to use my impact and just zip these out. So now that all the bolts are removed, you're just going to want to pull out the flywheel. Be careful, they're pretty heavy, so just be prepared that once it comes off the hub, it'll fall down. So I'm just gonna wiggle back and forth until it breaks free and pull it out of the way. Just like the transmission, I'm gonna clean everything. You have your rear main seal. Some people have leaks. I mean, I can't really tell. I'm gonna clean this up, get a better look at it. If you do the rear main seal on these cars, you gotta be careful. The factory service says to drop the upper oil pan. I had this motor out. I know some people can, wedge it in and do it by just removing these 3 bolts and, shoving the rear main seal in. But I found conflicting reviews on that method saying it's, more difficult. But right now I'm just going to clean this up and I'm going to remove this pilot bushing. So I have done it both methods. When I had the engine out of the car, I stuffed bread in here and used grease and pieces of like whole bread, and hammered it out. And it worked out pretty well for me actually, but I have a slide hammer, so since I have the right tool, I'm probably going to use the right slide hammer attachment and pull out the pilot bushing. And then, like I said, from there, just clean up the surface. So I'll get right to that. So I have my pilot bushing removal tool with the slide hammer. So I'm gonna use this, tighten it up, and pull out this bushing. Just want to make sure it's coming out straight. And just like that. As you can see, here's the old pilot bushing, and it's removed with the slide hammer. So, like I said, now that that's removed, I'm pretty much completely done with the disassembly. Now all that's left is to clean everything up, clean this up, clean my transmission up, prepare the transmission and the new clutch, and we'll get right to it. But that's the complete removal of the transmission, clutch, and flywheel components. So now it's just back to cleaning and reinstalling. So I'll get right to that. So I kind of cleaned up some of the bell housing. There's a lot of clutch material still, so I'm going to get in there with more in depth once I remove the throw-up bearing and clutch fork, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So the process to remove this is fairly simple. You don't really need any tools. You're gonna have to pop this off, give it some force. I believe there's a retaining clip. There's one right here. So pretty much just push this clip back, and you can feel it kind of disengage from where it is, and then you can pull forward too. So that's exactly what I did, and you'll see it kind of comes apart here. Here's the clip I was talking about. I have a new one, so as you can see, throw-up bearing wasn't too bad, but it was just, kind of cooked. So that's that, and I have the retaining clip here. So I'm set that to this side, input straps out of the way. So this is all, still a mess. Like I said, I want to get in here and clean it up more. I'm going to remove this. I forget what size socket it is, but I'm going to buzz this off and replace it with the new replacement part from Z1. And as I can see, I can pull out the clutch fork. So I'm going to put this new Z1 upgraded clutch fork in as well. Throw a little grease on these 2 contact points and some in here with the new ball, and slide everything back together. So stay tuned for that. So like I said earlier in the video, I'm upgrading my clutch fork to a Z1 clutch fork. My car's an 03, but it didn't have the stamped clutch fork, so this isn't really an upgrade per se, but if you have an early model, you usually have a stamped steel one, so having a solid one's better. So I went ahead and did it anyway. You just have to pop this clip in. It's easy. You just kind of push it in. So the clutch fork's ready to go. Just have to grease up the contact points
when I install it. And then now I'm just gonna do the throwout bearing, put the new throwout bearing onto the guide, and get to reassembly. So now that the clutch fork is all set up, I just pressed out the old pilot bearing from the retainer. I'm going to clean this up really good, and then I'm going to press on the new throwout bearing and then put the clips on, and I'll be ready to start the install on the transmission and have that ready for reinstall. So I cleaned this piece off, and I'm just going to make sure I blow it out, clean it well, and I'm going to get ready to press on the new throwout bearing. I have that right over here. So I'm just going to use a block of wood. If you have a press, that's perfect, but I'm just going to press it on with a block of wood in my vise, and I'll have this all ready to go. So I just put the clips on and the throwout bearing. I greased up the connection points. That way this is all ready to go. As you can see where I greased up the connection points. I'm going to wipe off some of the excess grease, but this is exactly how you need the throwout bearing set up. I have the clip here, so I'm going to throw a little bit of grease on the pivot ball that's on the transmission. But as for the clutch fork and the throwout bearing, this is all ready to go. So, still got a little bit more cleaning up to do, but I already torqued down the pivot ball, and I also greased the input shaft guide for the throwout bearing. So I put a thin layer of grease on that. I'm gonna take some of the grease off, honestly, but thin layer on both ends. And now I'm ready to put the clutch fork assembly and throwout bearing back on. So to do this, it just pretty much slides back on, pops in place. You want to make sure that the clip for the clutch fork pops in. You'll hear an audible click, and you want to make sure everything moves freely. So I'm going to go get to doing that now. So now I'm just going to toss my rubber boot back in first. So now I just toss the rubber boot back in for the clutch fork, and now I'm going to put the clutch fork and everything else back in. So I'm going to start by just guiding my clutch fork in, as well as the throwout bearing. Make sure it slides in freely, and then you're going to want to make sure you hear an audible click where the clutch fork should hit the pivot ball and lock into place. There it is. So now you can see the throwout bearing spins freely, and the clutch fork is able to pivot without any resistance. So everything's installed now. I'm going to clean up a little bit more, but as for the transmission side of things, and you're pretty much good to go. So this is all ready to go back in. Clutch fork's in, it's all clicked in. The spring's in the right position. Clutch fork is in the right position. The throwout bearing slides perfectly, so we're good to go.
All right, so now that I have the transmission somewhat clean and prepped, ready to continue with the clutch install, the first thing I'm going to do is replace the pilot bushing. So this is a copper bushing. It goes right in for the input shaft to slide into. So for this, you want to be careful not to mushroom the top of it when you hammer it in. Some people start with a block of wood. I found that a 14mm socket works best. You just want to make sure it goes in evenly. So I'm going to go tap this in with the socket and have it pretty much flush with this like lip right here. So I'm going to tap it in, and then we can go from there. So I just finished tapping it all in. It's all in the correct position. So now all that's left is I'm going to clean up a little bit more around the surface of the transmission. I'm going to spray some brake clean into each of these flywheel holes. So this is where the crankshaft. So I'm going to clean out these threads, make sure they're all cleaned. And then after that, I'm just going to have to line up the pin right here with the little mark on the flywheel and put the flywheel on, and then I'll be ready to install the rest of the clutch.
So now that the flywheel is ready to install, they come factory with some oil on it so it doesn't rust. So you want to spray the whole thing down. This is the back of it. You can see it's nicely engraved with Z1. Also note this little hole here. This is where you'll line up the dowel that I showed you on the crankshaft. So make sure you line that up when you install this flywheel. But yeah, up here I'm just gonna spray it with brake clean, clean up all the surfaces, make sure there's no oil left on it, and just prep it for install. Get all the oil. So now that the flywheel is all clean, I'm gonna go under the car and again align this up and put in the new flywheel bolts. I will add Loctite and then torque them in a star pattern to the correct specifications.
So now that I have the bowl lined up, the bolts and the hole lined up, I'm going to install the T55 new flywheel bolts, and first hand tighten them and then tighten the rest of them to torque to spec, and I'll be done with the flywheel installation.
So in the last clip I forgot to mention, for the flywheel bolts you want to add red Loctite. It's suggested to use it for the flywheel bolts, and it's also suggested to use blue Loctite for the pressure plate bolts, and that's what I'm going to do. So make sure you apply some thread locker before you torque them to spec. So just heads up, add that, and don't forget.
Okay, so now that I removed all of the flywheel bolts and I put red Loctite on all of them and put them back in, they're all hand tight. I'm going to torque each one of these bolts to 65 foot-pounds. The best way to keep the flywheel from moving is having a friend, in this case my girlfriend's holding the crank, so prevent the flywheel from spinning. So I'm going to torque each bolt in a cross-hatching pattern and torque them to 65 foot-pounds.
No, I have 6 of them. No, 9 of them. Ready?
Okay, so I ran out of storage on my camera, so I don't know what sequence I stopped recording, but I pretty much, tightened them in a cross pattern, the spec, and I went around all in a circle again just to ensure that everything was torqued. Now after that, I also sprayed it with brake clean and wiped it down again just to prevent any oils or any Loctite that might have seeped through from touching the surface of the flywheel. So now that this is done, I'm going to get my clutch alignment tool and the clutch and pressure plate and finish putting the clutch in.
Okay, so now that I have the flywheel installed, I'm going to go clean off the pressure plate as well. So I'm going to spray it with brake clean and wipe down this surface. And then once this is done, I'm going to head under the car with the clutch and the clutch alignment tool as well as the pressure plate, line everything up, and tighten up the clutch. And then from there, it'll just be back to the transmission install, which is the reverse of everything we just did to take it out. So I'm going to clean this up and get to it. So as you can see, I put the clutch alignment tool and the clutch into the spot, the corresponding spot. So I have the alignment tool in, made sure everything is in the correct orientation. And from here, I'm going to align up the pressure plate and then tighten the bolts all the way around the pressure plate. And then that'll be the final step to the clutch install. So it's the following day. I ended up getting some bigger jack stands to help raise the car so I can fit the transmission underneath. This is gonna work, but my transmission jack is still a little too high, so I'm gonna have my brother help me. We might pull it off this, slide the transmission underneath the car, and then try to, shake it back onto here, and then proceed with the install.
Since the install is pretty much the exact same as the removal at this point, I think I'm going to time lapse most of it. If you have any questions or comments regarding the install process, feel free to leave it in the description below or in the comment section below, and I'll try to get back to you and help you with further insight. Like I said, Z1 has a whole overview video on the install and process. It's a little hard to get under there with the camera while you're fighting to put the transmission back on, but again, just be careful of sensors and wires, and just make sure everything's lined up, everything's clean and tidy, and you don't want to force anything to go in. So for the bell housing bolts, they should go in and pretty much hand tighten them all the way around to make sure everything's secure, and then after that should be pretty much good to go. So yep, like I said, I'm going to get the transmission underneath and start installing it.
Artlist.io.
So after some fighting, lining everything up, I have the trans in place, and now I'm just reinstalling everything, doing the 4 rear bolts for the drive shaft. But as you can see, the trans is all mated up and in place, so now it's just reassembly. So once the drive shaft is back in place, then all I have to do is put this exhaust in, reconnect some connectors on the transmission, make sure everything's torqued, and then I'll be ready to drop the car, and the clutch job will be complete. So almost on the home stretch here.
Artlist.io.
So now that I have the trans in the car and everything buttoned up, I put the transmission drain bolt back in and torqued it to spec. I have the fill plug open, and I'm going to fill it with some fluid. So for this, I'm just gonna put this in the fill side, and you pump about 3.1 quarts or until it starts coming out of the fill plug. So I'm gonna get under the car, fill this transmission up, and then torque the fill bolt, and then that'll be it for the transmission. And I still have the exhaust to put on, and then I'm gonna drop the car, and it's all good to go. So wrapping up, and we're in the long stretch of the install. So just gonna get this fluid in, and we'll be good to go. So the transmission's full of fluid now. All I have to do is put the exhaust on. So I'm just gonna slide the exhaust under, bolt it up, and I'll be good to go. So final step is the exhaust, and this clutch job will be complete. So. So, just started it up for the first time. Interior's all back together. And probably can't hear me, but it runs. So, I don't know if it drives yet, but it runs. So, I'm gonna check for leaks, drop it on the ground, and feel out the clutch. So, now after this, it's just clean up and braking procedure, and then I'll be able to give you my full thoughts and opinions on the car. But that was the complete clutch install. Everything's torqued, all the exhaust bolts, all the drive shafts, everything. So it's all good, ready to go to rip. Thank you for watching, and I'll keep you guys updated. All right, so as you can see, I got the car back on the ground after the clutch install. I just dropped it off the jack stands, and now I'm cleaning up a little bit. Just make sure you have no leaks, and that your fluids are all good. The clutch so far I hopped in feels good. Grab's pretty strong, so I'm just gonna pull it out, go for a quick test drive, look for anything that might be out of the ordinary, but for the most part, everything's good. So that pretty much wraps up the full install. Just gonna put 500 miles in for the braking period and get back to you guys with another video on my thoughts on this whole clutch and whatnot. So far so good. Just gonna take it on a quick little rip and feel it out. I just took the car out for a quick drive, fill it up with gas, and everything feels really good. Still getting used to the new clutch, but as far as I can feel, I mean, it feels very dailyable, very easy to drive. grabs really well, so I'm pretty happy so far. Like I said, it's gonna act a little bit differently as I break it in with time. You can hear a little bit of chatter, but it's nothing too bad. I mean, it's a lightweight flywheel, but as you can tell, it's not like a garbage truck. My old setup sounded really crazy with the whole light flywheel and throwout bearing. So some chatter is expected, and as it breaks in, I guess we'll see how that progresses. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm just gonna put some miles on it, normal driving. And again, like I said, I'll come back if you guys want with an update video on how I feel about the clutch, if I'd recommend it. But so far, so good. Feels pretty quality, and I'm pretty happy with the whole process and the install. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll be sure to give you guys updates as time goes on, and see you in the next one. Thank you.